Happy Friday, Atlantic Canada. My name is Jacob Lingley. I've been working here at Brilliant Labs for the last 5 years, and I was inspired these last couple of weeks with all of the daily Maker Fun challenges. And just a couple of days ago, one of my colleagues, Natasha Vautour, who I'm going to call in a couple of seconds to join us on this adventure of digital skill and circle geometry, she issued a challenge to all Atlantic Canadian students who are following our Maker Fun Hours of, can you look through your junk drawer at home and see if you can find something that you can make something with? Now, my junk drawers are full of different things, and I decided to go into a junk drawer that is filled with things from when I used to be a mathematics teacher, a grade 8 math teacher, a number of years ago before I joined the Brilliant Labs team. And there I found one of the most underutilized tools that I bet many of us have lying somewhere around our house that we could use to make something with. It is the ordinary compass. Right. So I was able to have my colleague Natasha join us. She's waiting over on the other line. And with a push of a button, hey, there she is. Hello. Natasha, comment ça va?
Ça va bien, toi?
Ah, superb. And I want to thank you for the inspiration for this challenge the other day when you asked all of us to look into our junk drawer and see if there was something there that we could use to make. As I already showed people, I found a compass. Did you find your compass?
I found one today. Actually, a makeshift one.
There you go. Very nice. Well, it should work. And even any circular object will work for this. We're not doing anything very complex. The complexity is really going to come when we take this whole idea and try to transfer it over into a digital skill. So our colleagues John and Wiley, as you've seen last week, they've done a lot of tutorials on TinkerCAD, and I think you've done the voiceover for
Non, j'en
those.
ai fait deux.
Oh
J'en ai
wow!
fait deux en français aussi sur notre YouTube, oui.
Okay, so this is available in both languages. Perfect.
Yeah.
So if you're new to TinkerCAD, then check out those tutorials as well, because this is going to dive in really deep into one small itty bitty part of TinkerCAD, which many schools don't use, but it's a pretty powerful tool when you're doing repetitious diagrams like we're about to. Here's the other circle that I was just using. I didn't find my compass until you inspired me to look in a drawer that I thought it was in, and so I was using my daughter's puzzle toy. Okay, are we ready?
Oui.
Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the overhead camera. Let me know when you can see the grid paper.
On peut le voir, ouais.
Okay. So again, you don't need any special paper, and I think Natasha, you printed some graph paper, and maybe we can link to the website where you download it. Even just Google. What did you Google?
I just googled papier quadrillé.
Okay.
And a bunch of different ones.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm gonna move my keyboard out of the way so that we can get at this. What I've been doing here is putting the point of the compass on one of the intersections of the graph paper, and then just choosing a radius. And I did one earlier at 8. That was a little too big. I wasn't able to get all of it on there. We are going to try to get one consistent shape, and it's called the circle of life. This is a circle geometry technique that dates way back, like 4,000 years, and Mary, our creative specialist, is going to talk about that soon. And then you've discovered a couple of tidbits, Natasha, as well, right?
Yeah. Quand je faisais ma recherche pour t'aider avec ceci puis participer avec toi, je regardais vraiment sur les processus de géométrie puis où est-ce qu'on utilise la géométrie dans la vie de tous les jours. Puis c'était vraiment intéressant parce que la géométrie, c'est quelque chose qui fait travailler les deux côtés de notre cerveau. Le côté gauche et le côté droit, donc le côté artistique et le côté de logique.
Mm.
C'est pour ça que c'est beaucoup utilisé aussi en architecture. A lot of the big buildings and architects have to use these geometry in day-to-day.
Yeah. And I love it because, this is going to be very simple and we're just drawing circles, and that's one of the beauties to these complex buildings in architecture. Like, they resonate with us because of we see these primitive shapes like circles and squares and triangles, but yet they're incredibly complex as these primitive shapes take three-dimensional forms and then they intersect. It's I don't know, maybe we're geeks, but I think it's pretty neat. So I chose a radius here of what was it, 6? I think it doesn't matter. And then you can choose whether to go to. We're going to go to the outermost circumference of that circle that you just drew. So I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to put my point of the compass along that circumference and draw another circle.
On garde toujours la même grosseur de cercle?
Oui, c'est ça.
Oui.
Mais on peut la changer après en utilisant les couleurs différentes. And then the trick is, so if this is our main circle that we drew originally, then we're going to put our compass points at each of the intersecting intersections, the points of intersection around that original circle. So you can see I just created another point of intersection, and why don't I change to a black marker so you can see that a little better.
Donc, c'est tous les points où mes cercles se rencontrent.
C'est ça.
Là, je mets mon centre de mon compas là, puis je fais le tour.
Is it working with your DIY compass? There you go. All right. No? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you see it. Good. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly trace these once again so that you can see them a little better. These are great markers. They come in all kinds of different colors, and they have a nice fine felt tip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it comes together really quickly, doesn't it?
Oui.
And so in the end, you're going to have drawn 7 circles, but really it's the first one is just your guide. So it's 6 intersecting circles that form the circle of life.
Quand je faisais des lectures aussi, il y avait beaucoup de liens avec ces cercles de la vie-là et les religions, les différentes religions dans le monde.
Oui, c'est ça.
C'est vraiment intéressant à lire.
Donc, en fait, le nom de ce qu'on fait ici, ça s'appelle Sacred Geometry. Je sais pas c'est quoi en français, but in English, yeah, Sacred Geometry. And there are all kinds of different complex shapes that you can bring into it, and you're absolutely right. Like, they are so beautiful and awe-inspiring that there are many religions that incorporate this type of geometry in their religious symbols. Mm-hmm. So it's neat. So, so often our students in mathematics, they're only exposed maybe to geometry of finding the surface area of a circle, and there's a lot more to it. So what we've drawn here, this becomes the unit that you can then repeat over and over again. But there's a lot of awesome other things that you can do in here. So I drew mine with a radius of 6. So what if I use that same point on the compass, my original point, but I half that, and I change it to a radius of 3. You know what? I'm going to use another color. What if?
What if? C'est plus compliqué changer ma couleur.
Why? And you know what? While we're doing this and we're playing with different colors here, maybe it's a good time to cut to Mary, our creative consultant at Brilliant Labs Labo Creatif, and she's been doing some research of her own, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the history of circle geometry, or this type of fractal representation. That's something that we haven't talked about yet either. All right, so we're going to keep drawing. Why don't we flip over and hear what Mary says, and we'll come back.
Hi.
Hey guys. All right. So Mary, Natasha and I have been talking about this circle geometry, and we've done our own, but you as our creative specialist, I think you can lend a little bit more to this lesson. What did you learn about circle geometry?
Well, it's actually been used in art and design for over 4,000 years. I mean, from the pyramids to graphic design, we can all appreciate proportions and what's pleasing to the eye. And actually, a favorite art form of mine that can be appreciated mathematically and artistically is the Buddhist mandala.
I
And
think we've
Buddhist
got.
monks actually take 3 years of technical artistic training to create one. And because they're visual representations of Buddhist teachings, the more perfect they are, the better they can depict those lessons.
Wow.
And yeah, actually, here's a picture of a Tibetan sand mandala, and they're made with colored sand. And the monks use compasses and make an outline in chalk, and it's all created from memory. And they actually use fine metal tubes filled with sand. And the tubes have little ridges on them, so they create vibrations by rubbing another metal rod on it, and the sand runs out, and they create images. But once they're done, they actually have a ceremony that washes all the sand away. So it represents the Buddhist teaching of impermanence and all the energy that disperses back into the universe, which is pretty
Mm,
cool.
that's interesting. It reminds me of okay, this is going to be totally off topic, but in permanence, uh, students often are heartbroken when they have to rip apart their projects, right? Because it's you're destroying this masterpiece. But I can't imagine washing all this sand away.
Yeah, it can take days and sometimes even weeks of work to create something like that. And it's just part of their way of life. They don't believe that anything should be held there forever. So
Cool. And there's another image in here, Natasha. Ça c'est quelque chose que t'as vu eu.
Ça, j'étais l'année dernière à San Francisco, à la Maker Faire de la Bay Area. Puis c'était fait par une école de secondaire de la Californie. C'est une représentation d'un mandala, mais créé avec des aimants puis des boules qui se promènent, mais ce sont en dessous de la surface. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? Ce sont des robots. C'est tout magnétisé, des petits moteurs qui fait que la bille se promène puis elle crée ce design-là dans le sable, puis c'est répétitif. Ça fait que la bille pouvait se promener toute la journée, puis quand même toujours suivre le programme qui avait été préparé par les étudiants
Wow.
pour créer ça.
That makes me think about like what if et si peut-être on peut utiliser nos propres robots en utilisant le B-board and have different color sands, pouring out.
Mm.
I
Ou
love
même
it.
dans la neige. D'en faire un dans la neige avec un robot
Ben
qu'on peut...
voilà.
yeah,
Hein?
Hmm. All right. Well, why don't we see if we can play around with transferring and again, nothing that we can do on on the computer right now in the limited time that we have is ever going to be as beautiful as these Tibetan monks in mandala. That's amazing. But we're going to see if we can transfer some of our just pencil and paper drawings with the compass over to TinkerCAD. So thanks a lot, Mary, and maybe you can come back another time and teach us a little bit more about because 3D printing these, we only have one color. It'd be really nice to be able to add another layer of color in there somehow. So thanks for sharing that.
definitely. Anytime.
So there we are. There's a little bit more of an insight into the history of circle geometry.
Mm. C'est intéressant hein, de voir tout ce qu'ils font, puis leur vision, le temps mis dans une tâche, puis c'est juste
Yeah,
fini.
yeah, and it's kind of ceremonial, right? Of how do you live in the excitement rather than the sorrow of erasing all of your hard work.
Mhm.
By erasing it, you get to start fresh, and hopefully, while you create it, you have another idea that you can use to build on.
J'ai
Um,
trouvé intéressant qu'ils ont 3 ans d'entraînement. That's one thing I found interesting.
anyway, why don't we see if we can? And I don't know if I've shown this yet. Let me go back to here. We go. So this is what I hope for all of us to be able to create, or at least if you're watching this, you may not have access to a 3D printer. But if you would like one of us to print it, we can, or you can use the file in different ways. I think there's even a way that you can download the STL from TinkerCAD and upload it to Minecraft or something like that. But even creating this three-dimensional representation of circle geometry. It's pretty cool.
Puis s'ils vont sur notre site web de Fun Créatif, dans nos pages web, ils peuvent nous envoyer leur design et on peut les imprimer pour eux autres.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, des gens avec différentes régions, they can touch base.
Yeah, many of our Brilliant Labs partners or colleagues have printers that they have access to. So for sure, get in touch with us and we'll try to print it. All right, we're going to switch over and see if we can pull up TinkerCAD. And just bear with me one moment here. All right, so this should be pretty familiar to many of you if you've used TinkerCAD before. But what we're going to do is come on over to CodeBlocks. And you can see that I've been preparing for this for a little bit. I have the circle of life already done here, and then I have more of a fractal representation, so continuing another iteration and expanding it a little more. But we're going to start from scratch. New design. Okay. So just like in TinkerCAD, this gives you a work plane surface. This is what's going to become the bed of the 3D printer. And over on the left-hand side, very similar to what you would expect TinkerCAD to have, they have a bunch of primitive shapes that you can drag and drop over. So which one do you think we should use, Natasha?
Le cercle, es-tu là, ou le...
Yeah, le cylindre.
Le cylindre.
And I think I can make this a little larger so that you can see. Great. So what's pretty important when you're using this blocks, the code blocks, is to click on that chevron, right, that arrow, and it brings over a bunch of other values that you can change. And the other part that's super new is over here, stepping it up. So you can actually play, and it'll step down through each block of code that you drag and drop. So if I just play this right now, it's going to drop a cylinder around the point of origin.
Okay.
Right? So already, do you see why this is going to be an issue if we try to export it in 3D print?
Oui, parce que ça dépasse, ça va dessous ton lit de ton imprimante.
Yeah.
Ça va nous donner une erreur quand on va venir à l'imprimer.
Yeah, exactement. And that's one of the issues that we see in students designing for 3D printing all the time is they have something, and if you talk mathematically, it's below the XY plane. So we need to make sure that your shapes are above the XY plane on that work surface so that the bottom of your shape is, or the work plane, so that the bottom of your shape is at Z equals 0. So we're going to do that. The other thing that I don't want to make a really long print. So these that I prototyped with, it only took about 47 minutes, and even that was long. So we're only going to make it maybe a cylinder that's 2 millimeters thick.
Okay.
Radius of 10 is great. So the next value here is your height. So I'm going to change that to 2.
Ouais, ça va être l'épaisseur. Ton H, c'est ta hauteur qui est l'épaisseur, puis là, ton radius, c'est ton rayon.
Ouais, c'est ça. But we still have that issue here where it's above and below. It's split right down the middle. And so we need to translate that about the z-axis. So it's a lot simpler. In CodeBlocks, they don't say translate, they say move. Oh. And right? And then it gives you those options. So X, Y, or Z. Why don't we put the opposite of what we were looking for? So let's say that we want to bring it all the way down below the XY plane, and we'll put -1 in there.
Donc là, on l'a tout descendu.
Oui, c'est ça. Donc l'opposé devrait marcher. Yeah. And if we look below, it's all above.
Oui.
All right.
C'est important de se rappeler, c'est comme un peu en cartésien.
Exactement.
Ton axe Y avec ton axe X, mais ton Z, ça va être ta hauteur.
Oui.
C'est ce qui est différent.
And that's why I love, doing your using your compass and measuring out your radius. It's an exact interpretation or representation of what you're doing here. It's just it's a little faster, and when you get to really complex fractals, so that you have several circles, or let's say hundreds of circles on top of each other, You don't want to be hand drawing that. Maybe you do. That's fine. But bringing that into a computer, you're able to speed up that repetition.
Parce que j'ai juste essayé avec deux grandeurs de rayons sur mon dessin ici, puis c'était déjà très difficile à voir à cause j'avais pas changé de couleur.
Okay, right. So I'm glad that you said that. So you see here, I've made one orange and one blue, and if we hit play, okay, so it was orange, and then it turns blue. So all of these shapes spawn, or they appear at the origin on a Cartesian plane. X equals 0, Y equals 0, and Z equals 0. So what I like to do is change the radius of the interior cylinder that we're going to end up subtracting to something that's a little less, and then exaggerating the height, making it higher so that I can at least see it. Only by a little, so radius of 9, hauteur of 3.
Okay.
Right. And then, there we go. And you see how this is really jagged?
Ouais.
Right? We can smooth that out.
Oh, je savais pas ça.
Yeah, so the edges here, you see it's 20. We can change that maybe to 60. And down here 60. And it's worth saying every change that you make in your blocks, it's only actualized, or it only happens when you come back over here and hit play.
Yeah.
And so now you can see that it's much smoother.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that neat?
Okay. Ouais. J'ai appris plein de choses.
All right. Now, so that's interesting. I thought we had moved this, right? But because that we changed the height of just so that we could see it, that's still beneath the surface. So there's a couple of things we can do. We can change the height of that interior cylinder, or the amount that is translated there. So the height was 3. We're going to change that to half of 3, so 1.5, 1.5. Run. Okay, so they're both above, and now we're ready to take that away. So just like in TinkerCAD, each of your shapes can become a hole. So over here, one's solid and one's a hole. And if we run it, there's another block down here that says group, create group. And this time when I hit play, it's going to create a group and it's going to subtract all of it, but look at how it steps through the blocks. I think that's really neat. So now that we have that block at the bottom, create group, it takes that interior cylinder away, and you're left with your first ring. And at the start of this, like, this is a lot longer to get set up than just grabbing your compass and going, but it should go a little faster because you can do cool things like make a copy of this. So now, and let's just change that to a different color so that you can see the change. So after we make that same original unit circle, I now have a copy, and why don't I move that copy? And this is exactly what we were doing after we drew the original circle. We're going to move, and I'll ask you, Natasha, how much should we move that clone, that new copy of the circle?
Okay, so my radius is 10.
Mm-hmm.
I should move it 10.
Okay. And around the X, Y, or Z axes.
Right.
So we can...
So I would say around the X.
Perfect. Let's try that.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll put 10 in. And it steps through. Now I'm super glad that you said 10, right?
What?
Because we actually want to move it the entire diameter. So in this design,
okay.
right? In this design, we're going to essentially erase that same unit, or sorry, that original circle, because when you're using this computational programming, you're creating a rule system for the computer. You don't have to have that original circle there as a guide. It's going to do that. It's going to do that for you. So I'm just going to move this up. How do I?
So j'aurais dû le bouger de 20.
Oui, c'est ça. So we'll come back over here. move it by 20. I'm going to speed this up so we're not waiting every time. There we are. Now, if we are going to 3D print it, we have an issue here because these walls really aren't interlocking. So if we want that to stand on its own, maybe we shouldn't move it by 20, maybe 19 and a half. And this will make sense once we, right?
OK, ouais. Là, ça va mieux se grouper quand on va les imprimer. Ils vont rester ensemble.
C'est ça. Et puis, on peut les grouper encore ensemble. And okay, that's why don't we change it into one color? Not that it really matters because it's just going to print in the color of your filament that you have, but there you go.
C'est ça que j'allais dire. C'est important que tu pas garder en tête toutes les couleurs de tes ronds si tu veux les imprimer parce que ça va imprimer la couleur du filament que tu as sur ton imprimante. La majorité des imprimantes qu'on a accès ont juste une couleur.
Yeah. And it's true. That's one of the huge limitations, right? There are multicolored printers that are able to print in more than one color. We don't have many of them. And so when students make these really beautiful designs with multiple colors, sometimes they regret doing it because then it only prints in one color. So this is where, if you didn't think it was mathy enough already, this is where it can get really neat because I've done enough work. A fractal is made out of the same base unit over and over again. So if you go back and you look at our original drawing, if you use your unit as two interlocking circles, how many copies of that circle are we going to need?
Cool.
Right? So in TinkerCAD here, in CodeBlocks, I can call this new object. So if I drag that hat in, create new object, object 0, then I can come down here after it does all that. I can make a separate down here, add a copy of object, and at the bottom it's created a variable for me, add a copy of object 0. And I'm going to change that color to blue. So let's see what happens now. And you can see it changes from pink to blue, right? Because it spawned in the original. It's covering up that pink one.
Ils sont encore là tous les deux.
Oui.
Oui? OK.
Oui. Et on peut les voir si on bouge le copie d'objet 0 juste un peu. I'm not a magician. I'm not covering anything up. But if we move that, let's just say, 1 millimeter along the y-axis, there it is. That's kind of pretty, just like that, isn't it?
Pretty cool.
Okay. So I'll get rid of that move. And how do I get rid of that? Delete block. Okay. So what do we want to do to that blue copy?
On veut la tourner.
Exactement. So there's another block called rotate, and this is, I think, a grade 8 or 9 mathematics outcome, and it really requires you to think about it sometimes. Do you want to turn it around the x-axis, the y-axis, or the z-axis? You didn't know that I was going to put you on the spot, did you?
Ah, oui, là, je pense, un petit peu. C'est vrai qu'il est là. Moi, je le tournerais sur... Ça dépend. Jusqu'i. Faudrait le tourner sur les deux, non? Non, je le tourne sur Y.
Y, OK.
Just
Je
one
suis
minute.
content que tu as dit Y. Garde ça. Whoa!
Ah!
Right? But since we're using a 3D printer, we could print that. So, in pencil and paper drawing, we're limited to 2 dimensions. What would a 3-dimensional representation look like turning around a different axes of the circle of life?
Donc, c'est X.
Okay. Oh.
Ah!
So it's Z, And this is something that, this is something where you're really thinking about. So the Z is the vertical axis. And so you're rotating it around. That's the pivot point in the center of that, right? So you're rotating it around the Z axis. And people often make that mistake because, it really requires you to visualize the and the spatial manipulation that you have to do, and it's just that that thought pattern that makes me respect architects and artists that work in three-dimensional space so much.
C'est intéressant, par exemple, qu'avec TinkerCAD, tu peux voir tout de suite ta réponse que non, c'est pas là. Comme tu peux bien voir ton déplacement là, que tu as fait dans ta rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in going back to the circle of life, we're working with circles. So how many degrees are in a circle?
360.
360. So disons que that we have 3 sets. So how many degrees are we rotating each of the copies of the 2 interlocking circles? And I don't know. 120, that's right. I was just going to say, I don't know if I explained that very well, but I think it's 120. So if we come in here, and this is pretty cool, you can just drag this this arrow to 120, or you can type it in. Let's come up here, play it, see what we get. Boom. There we go. So now, what if we just do that again? What if? If I duplicate this one more time, let's see what happens. There it is.
Ça a juste dupliqué ton bleu, ça n'a pas dupliqué ton rose.
Exactement, ça dupliqué objet.
Ton spawn, là, comme ton...
Oui, exactement, ton spawn. And then it rotated it from the position of the first spawn. It rotated it another 120 degrees. Okay. And then we can create group at the bottom of this, and it should group all of it together so that you don't see, although this is kind of neat, down here, you see 2 inverted triangles together, right? So, but if we add that create group down at the bottom, it should, it's thinking about it, maybe, there it is. This type of stuff that we were doing, it really grinds your computer to a halt, and of course, since it's on the internet, it's making these changes, you're waiting for a computer somewhere to finish the process. So there it is. Okay, so to finish this off, I just want to show you, after playing around with this a little bit the other day, I created something pretty cool. So if we go back to TinkerCAD, the dashboard, once it loads, yeah. So here we are. Tinker this.
Ça, c'est une belle fonctionnalité de TinkerCAD, que t'as pas besoin de sauvegarder, puis c'est toujours là sous ton compte.
Yeah, no, yeah. I love it. Okay, so something similar. I'm just going to play it and speed it up and see what happens here. So there's our unit, and then that unit is repeated a number of times, right? And so it just becomes this interlocking tapestry. I don't know, it's kind of like a 3D printed fabric that you can make, or if, yeah. Isn't that neat? Okay, so listen, Natasha, thank you very much for joining me and going through all of this from paper into the digital TinkerCAD version.
No problem.
All right,
yeah.
We'll do it again. Make sure that you keep following along for all the activities from Brilliant Labs every day of the week.
Oui, tous les jours.
Happy Friday.